I woke up one night and I wasn't sure why. It was dark. I reached over to look for my wife and noticed she was sitting up in bed beside me. She was staring at our bedroom door. I asked her what she was doing and she replied without turning to look at me. I heard someone walking downstairs. I opened my mouth to tell her she was being ridiculous and to go back to bed. I heard someone cough downstairs. I instead told her to call the police and got out of bed. I armed myself with the best weapon on hand, a heavy bedside lamp. I slowly pushed open our bedroom door and crept towards the top of the stairs. I stood there and stared down into the dark. I called out in a shaky voice, "Who's there? I'm armed." I waited for a reply. The seconds ticked by. I strained my ears to hear the faintest whisper. I heard the sound of someone running on the hardwood floor. A few seconds later, a door slammed shut. The police said there was no sign of a break-in. They questioned the neighbors, and one of their security cameras showed someone entering my house around 1 a.m. The cameras belonged to Randy across the street. He had me over for drinks that night and showed me the recordings. There was a patch of trees at the end of our road that led out to a larger forest. The video showed someone walking out of the tree line and down the street. They turned once they reached my house and went straight to where I hid the spare key. Several hours later, they could be seen running out of the house and back towards the trees. The police had already concluded the key was missing and told us to change the locks. We were told an officer would keep watch on the house for a few weeks to be safe. This seemed to put Debbie's mind at ease. I didn't sleep well in the weeks after. I would wake up in the middle of the night restless. I couldn't sleep until I had checked every room in the house. On the first night I did this, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Officer Davidson. He had been the officer to respond to my wife's call the previous night. He asked me if everything was all right. I told him I was just checking nobody had gotten inside while I was asleep. He told me only one woman walking her German Shepherd and 2 cars had passed by. He gave me the precise time each had done so. I felt embarrassed and apologized. I explained I was just paranoid. He chuckled and pat me on the shoulder. He told me I wouldn't be a good husband if I wasn't worried. He said one night, a few months after his youngest daughter was born, someone had broken into his home. The burglar had stumbled into his oldest room and woke her up. He told me that he didn't sleep for 4 days afterwards. His wife shook him awake on the 5th night. He was slumped over the kitchen counter with his gun on his lap. He didn't remember falling asleep. It was dark. He didn't recognize her. He pulled the trigger before he knew what he was doing. He told me the safety had been on and to take care of myself. He looked down at the gun I had forgotten I was holding. I nodded. He turned to walk away, and I asked him a question. I asked if they caught whoever had broken into his home. He looked back at me and told me not to worry. He didn't say anything else and walked back towards a black cad with tinted windows parked a few houses down. A week later, I woke up around 3 a.m. As usual, I checked out the window for the police watch car, and there were no cars parked on the street. I called the police immediately. After explaining my situation, the woman on the other end of the line told me that there was probably some delay with the shift change. I decided to stay up and wait for the next watch to arrive. It was 10 a.m. when Deb found me still sitting in the living room staring out the window. I hadn't slept. I called them again. The woman that answered the phone this time was more interested in what I had to say. I was asked a lot of questions about what I had seen and what times I had seen them. I was asked if I had noticed anything unusual. I said no. She thanked me for my time and went to hang up. I stopped her. I demanded to know why nobody had been watching my house last night. She began to tell me for a 3rd time that she was looking into the issue, and I cut her off. I asked to speak to Officer Davidson. She went silent for several seconds. The officer stationed to keep watch last night was Officer Davidson. Nobody had heard from him in several hours. She hung up. The police didn't send anyone else to keep watch after that. I started to notice things would go missing around the house. Where there was once 3 vases, there was now 2. I tried to light a candle one night and couldn't find a lighter anywhere. We only had a pepper shaker now. One morning, Deb told me we should install cameras. I asked her if she didn't feel watched enough as it is, and she laughed. I smiled. It had been the first time I'd heard her laugh in weeks. We installed cameras in every room in the house. Plenty outside too, with motion-activated lights. I wish we hadn't. It was a few days after we had installed the cameras. and I was looking through the footage when I saw it. I watched myself walk into the house one night. It was 2 a.m. I walked through a few different rooms downstairs. Sometimes I would stand still and look at a random spot at the wall for minutes at a time. I walked towards the stairs and looked at a photo hanging on the wall. It was a wedding photo. It showed me and Deb outside the church with our families to either side of us. I loved that photo. I grabbed it off the wall and walked out of the house, closing the door silently behind me. I checked another feed that showed myself and Deb asleep together in bed at the same time. I never told her what I saw. Instead, I invited Randy over one night. After a few beers, I asked to show him something. He looked nervous. After he saw the recording, he went pale. I asked him what he thought it was. I expected him to be as confused as I was, maybe shocked or scared. He was angry. He accused me of lying. He said I was playing a trick on him. I was trying to get him to believe that I had broken into my own home. I tried to explain, and he left. A few nights later, he knocked on the door and apologized. He asked to come in, and if he hadn't looked so scared, I wouldn't have said yes. He told me that he believed me now and that me and Debbie should leave. He told me he was leaving tonight. I asked him what had made him change his mind so suddenly. He told me he had a fight with his wife and had been sent to sleep on the couch. He had woken up the next morning, shivering. His wife had taken the blanket off him in the middle of the night, and he couldn't find it anywhere. Only when he confronted his wife about it, she swore it wasn't her. He told me she was right. He told me that he had taken it. After his wife denied it, he had brought up the living room camera feed from the night before, intending to catch her out on a lie. Instead, they both watched himself crawl out of a coat closet underneath their stairs. He had walked to stand in front of the couch, looking down at a sleeping figure wrapped in a blanket. He told me it didn't move for 6 hours. He said he couldn't see its eyes, but he told me he knew it didn't even move its eyelids to blink. It just stood there in the dark and watched him sleep. Just before sunrise, it left, dragging the blanket along the ground behind it all the way down the sidewalk and into the trees. He stood to leave and told me I should be following him. I told him I had nowhere else to go. He told me I wouldn't be going anywhere once that thing killed me, and he left. I wish it had. The other neighbors started reporting the same. Odd sounds at night, things going missing. The police never responded to any of their calls. I was up keeping watch. Every night I patrolled the house and afterwards didn't pretend to go back to sleep anymore. I sat at the foot of the stairs. I watched the front door and listened for any sound in the house. I had my gun in hand. I could see outside through the living room window from where I was sitting. I watched the motion lights flash on a few houses down, in the direction coming from the woods. I didn't see anyone on the street. I couldn't hear the sound of anyone walking or a car's engine passing by. I watched the motion lights in front of my own home flash on. I stood up and pressed my eyes against the peephole. I saw a face I recognized. A moment later, a knock at the door made me jump backwards. "Police, open the door." I didn't move. I don't think I even blinked. I watched the door handle turn and heard the door rattle as the figure beyond tried to open it. "This is Officer Davidson. Open the door." I took a step forward and pressed the barrel of my gun against the door frame, right above where I could see a shadow in the light coming from under the door. He knocked again. "Open the door." It was Deb's voice this time. I pulled the trigger. The wooden door splintered as I fired a third, fourth, and fifth time. My ears were ringing. All I could smell was copper and smoke. I opened up what was left of the door and stepped outside. There was nothing but blood and wood chips on the ground. I charged down the walkway and looked at a trail of blood leading towards the forest. A few of the neighbors had come outside now. They looked at me. They saw the gun. They saw the blood. They nodded and went back inside. There was a sound between a dog's whine and a baby crying, slowly growing fainter by the second. It was coming in the direction of the forest. I went back inside as well. I walked back upstairs and opened the door to my bedroom and found the bed empty. Deb wasn't there. Deb wasn't anywhere I looked. I woke the neighbors again, calling her name in the street. A few of the guys I had drinks with came out to help me look. We never found her. I called the police to file a missing persons report, and once I told the man on the phone what area I lived in, his tone changed. He told me he was sorry for my loss before he hung up the phone. I haven't seen that thing since. I spend my nights waiting for it and spend my days looking for it in the woods. Some days when I'm deep in the forest and I can't hear the breeze, for a second the birds stop chirping and I swear I can hear laughter. I could never forget her laugh. It started with small things. Electronics would break a lot when he was around. I had to get my laptop fixed twice. My fridge went out once, and I had to scramble to drive all the food to my parents' house, so it didn't go bad while I was getting it fixed. Arjun helped. My house's circuit breaker tripped one time too when he went to plug something in. I tested the same plug later when he was gone, and it didn't trip that time. Arjun has always had really good hearing, like really good. I can't count the number of times he's heard me mumble something through a wall. I've tested it. I'll speak so quietly that even I can barely hear it, and he'll have caught it word for word from outside the closed door. A few times I caught his reflection in the mirror and I could swear it was slightly out of sync, moving a little too slow or making the wrong expressions. The smile stretched too wide, or eyebrows furrowed when Arjun's clearly weren't. In the same vein, every now and then I'd see him glaring at me out of the corner of my eye, but when I looked at him directly, all I saw was the shaggy mess of black hair on the back of his head. It was easy enough to dismiss all this at the time. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. It never happened with anyone else, just him. But I dismissed it until last week. I had driven over to his house, something I don't do often since we usually meet outside or at mine. It was supposed to be a quick stop by to give back some work papers he'd forgotten at mine on Friday evening, so I didn't call ahead. As I approached the distinctive red front door that stood in contrast to the dull colors of the rest of the street, something felt different. I looked around. My surroundings were the same as always. Pristine White House exterior, broken planters, and 3 slightly grimy steps leading up to the entrance. As I reached for the knocker, there was a tug at the back of my mind, like realizing you've forgotten something, but you can't remember what it was. No one answered the first knock, or the second. To my surprise, when I tried the handle, the door gave way. My chest began to knot as I stared wide-eyed at the opening. Arjun wouldn't just leave it unlocked. Had there been a break-in? Was he okay? I inhaled shakily a few times, trying to bring my heart rate down. I was getting ahead of myself. Maybe he'd just forgotten to lock it. Happens to the best of us. I let myself in, pushing the door further inward as I stepped over the threshold. Immediately, I could feel my panic rising again. Arjun's house is pretty open plan, so from the living room I was able to see most of the area downstairs. I called out for him. The house seemed empty. If Arjun was home, I'd have expected to hear movement, something cooking on the stove, or at least a TV playing. It was silent. I checked all the rooms upstairs, but they seemed completely untouched. It would be uncharacteristic for a break-in, and if Arjun had up and left, which I was now considering as a possibility, wouldn't he take some of his things? All his clothes were still hanging in the large built-in closet next to the rucksack he always takes when we go backpacking. When I came back downstairs, I realized there was still one room I'd forgotten to check in my hurried sweep of the house, the kitchen. I quickly walked past the living room and rounded the corner. The kitchen is separate from the other rooms downstairs. You can't see into it from the living room, which is why I missed it initially. The door is made of stained wood with a black round doorknob. It was closed. I listened, straining my ears to catch the slightest hint of sound coming from behind the door. Nothing. Now the rising panic was accompanied by a twisting feeling in my gut. I wanted to leave, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It was just a door, polished but old, with the wood splitting slightly in some places. More importantly, I still didn't know what had happened to Arjun, and now his phone was going straight to voicemail. This was the only place in the house I hadn't looked. Just as I'd plucked up the courage to reach out and grab the knob, I heard a noise from inside. It sounded like someone throwing up. No, it sounded like a cat coughing up a hairball. I held the black metal tight in my hand and twisted. The door swung open steadily, inviting me in. I'd sort of forgotten that Arjun's house had a basement. I'd never been down there, and the door always stayed closed and locked, so it was easy to let it fade into the wall. Maybe imagine it as some sort of food pantry, instead of what it really was, A cold, concrete, windowless expanse hidden beneath our feet. I don't like basements. Yellow-orange light spilled out of the open basement door, illuminating the kitchen in a dingy faux sunset glow. Looking around, I realized why it seemed to be the only light source in the room. All the blinds were shut. I didn't even realize his kitchen had blinds. Arjun always leaves them open. I almost jumped out of my skin, heart thundering as that horrific hacking puking sound echoed from the basement, louder now. The noise was wet and visceral. It grated against my eardrums, sending chills down my spine. I shivered. Whatever was in the basement retched again. This time the noise was accompanied by wet thudding, like it was puking up huge chunks of something. A moment of silence, and then it spoke. It was a harsh, raspy noise, like the thing was struggling to take in air, and I could barely make out the words through its wheezing. The voice was so inhuman, so alien to my ears, and yet, I don't know what compelled me to walk forward. My memories of this part are hazy, but the best way I can describe it is like I was being tugged forward by an invisible string embedded deep within my chest. I stood in the basement doorway for a while, eyes following the narrow wooden steps all the way down. They were walled off on both sides. They ended in concrete. I heard it clearer this time. Fuck. Fuck those bastards, it rasped. Fuck them. I hope, it wheezed. I hope they burn. The thing coughed, wet and loud, and I flinched. I still find it odd how even through the absolute, mind-numbing terror I was experiencing, I still felt a sense of morbid curiosity in that moment. What exactly was down there? The mere existence of this creature in the basement was making me reevaluate everything I thought I knew about, well, everything. It could talk. It even spoke like it felt emotions. It was angry at someone, and it sounded ill, very ill. The sounds of the creature struggling, its labored breath and lung-rending coughs, its quiet groans of pain that reverberated off the claustrophobic walls of the basement. They tugged at something tender, deep inside me. I wanted to help. I cast the thought out of my mind immediately. It sounded insane even to myself. What if that thing was hostile? Who knew what it would be capable of, even in its current state? Maybe all of this was a ruse anyway, some kind of trap that targeted my empathy. The best course of action was to just leave, obviously. I didn't even have the slightest clue what that thing was. I still don't. I began to weigh my exit options. If I made a break for it, would I be able to outrun whatever was down there? I barely had time to mull it over before something at the bottom of the stairs drew my attention. A long, clawed hand, bruised black and green like decay, dripping with a clear, snot-like liquidy gel that glistened in the lamplight. It scraped at the ground, nails digging into the grooves of the cement. I froze. God, I felt sick. My stomach churned horribly as I tried to process the gruesome sight I was confronted with. I felt like a snake was thrashing around my insides. It's a miracle how I managed not to puke right there and then. Instead, I remained deadly silent. I didn't even dare to breathe as I stood paralyzed in the doorway. My mind was blank and my vision began to swim. Whether from pure terror or lack of oxygen, I couldn't tell. I heard a scrape from below paired with a grunt as more of the arm appeared, coated in that slippery goo that oozed onto the surrounding concrete, staining it a dark gray. My heart dropped as I finally realized what it was doing. It was trying to pull itself forward. I ran. I've never run so goddamn fast in my life. It's been a week since then. Arjun started texting me an hour after I left. It was regular, innocuous stuff at first. Hey, what's up? I think I left some work papers at your place. Yo, dude, Rue asleep? You always text back. So fast. I think that just made the whole thing so much worse. I couldn't bring myself to answer. I stopped checking my messages after a while. He started calling me, again and again and again. I blocked his number. He even came by my house a few times. I never answered. I kept my curtains shut after the first time. All of them. After everything I saw in that house. In that dingy hellhole of a basement. There's just one thing I can't get out of my head. It's the thing that's kept me awake every night since that day, tossing and turning in the sheets. It was Arjun's voice. When the creature spoke in that raspy, hellish, inhuman voice, underneath it all, I heard, Arjun. Same tone, same cadence, same voice. I can't explain it. I just know it was him. I'm struggling to accept that what I witnessed down there is real. I can't. How am I supposed to accept that my friend, my best friend, is a monster? I'm just a regular police officer from a northern state in Mexico near the US border. Nothing out of the ordinary. I don't investigate homicides or have access to super strange cases. I don't do anything like what you see in movies. I'm usually assigned to traffic duty or security at events where civil protection requires our presence. But that didn't save me from getting involved in something so horrible that it keeps me up at night, unable to sleep, wondering whether it's a good idea to share this before an imminent end. I know the information is sensitive and obviously illegal, even if I'm telling it to a group of strangers on anonymous forums online, keeping both the people involved and the locations anonymous. Everyone knows perfectly well that this country's biggest tragedy and what this country suffers from is insecurity, mainly due to organized crime. Whether the government is to blame or not, I'm not interested in debating that. Everyone has their own opinion. Sorry for the long introduction, but I needed to properly tell you my story. One night I was on traffic patrol with my partner, whom I'll call Andre. Everything was normal until we stopped someone for speeding in a gray van. We chased him for a couple of blocks because he wouldn't slow down. We turned on the siren, the lights, until finally he did. From the moment I stepped out of the patrol car and walked toward the driver's window, I could see in the rearview mirror that he was moving nervously. For a second, we made eye contact through the mirror. I could see the terror in his eyes. It was enough warning for me to approach cautiously. I placed my hand on the weapon at my belt, ready to draw. That's when the door suddenly burst open and the man jumped out of the vehicle. A short man, messy hair, dressed casually. I immediately took a defensive stance. To be honest, we're not exactly known for having great training. People joke about us, call us Maru-chan, because we're basically instant cops. We go through a 6-month theoretical and practical course, and after that, they think we're ready to work. We have basic defense knowledge, nothing special. So when that man suddenly threw the door open, catching me off guard, my first reaction was to run and hide behind the van. Cowardly? Probably. I watched Andres get out of the patrol car running, pass right by me at full speed, chasing the man. I just stood there, not knowing what to do, looking around. That's when I heard banging coming from the back door of the van, the exact place where I had been hiding seconds earlier. It scared me. I stepped back, took a breath, drew my weapon, and opened the door. It was dark, but I could see small points with the faint light from the streetlights, like owls in the dark. Eyes. I immediately pulled out my flashlight and shined it inside the van. There were at least a dozen people, small people. They all shut their eyes from the light, mostly girls. Their legs and hands were tied, and their mouths were covered with tape. Their terrified eyes looked at me, begging for help. I just stood there like an idiot, trying to process what I was seeing. I couldn't move. I felt something unnatural. I can't explain it. Like something was forcing me to close the door and go back to work, as if I hadn't seen anything. I turned off my flashlight. It seemed to bother them. My partner arrived, out of breath, and stood next to me. "What the hell?" he asked, panting, barely able to get the words out. Did he get away?
I didn't look at him. Still lost in those small points in the dark.
Yeah, I couldn't catch him, he said, trying to catch his breath. But he dropped his phone. I think we can find him with this. I was still stunned, in disbelief. He noticed my state and stepped closer to my side. I said nothing, letting him discover it for himself. Holy shit! I heard him curse over and over while I kept fighting my own mind. "I'm going to report this," my partner said, handing me the phone of the man who had escaped. That's when I finally snapped out of it. I looked at it. It was unlocked, with Google Maps open. I zoomed in on the screen, searching for the location it was heading somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Maybe I'm not good with combat tactics, but I do have experience with technology. I checked his search history and found so many places that made my blood run cold. Orphanages, churches, schools, hospitals, and many locations in the middle of nowhere. I think I understood the modus operandi. He would pick up the kids from those places, then deliver them to locations sent to him that same day. Those locations changed every time to avoid drawing attention. "They're coming," Andre said, returning with a worried expression. He approached one of the girls and carefully removed the tape from her mouth so as not to hurt her. She started crying horribly, terrified. "Easy," Andres tried to calm her. "You're okay now. You're safe." There was something in his voice. Was he lying? I heard sirens in the distance. Backup was on the way. These were my last seconds to check the phone before an investigator took it. I went through messages and calls, looking for anything useful. I pulled out my notebook and wrote down some numbers, coordinates, names. Andres watched me do it. I could tell from his face he didn't approve, but I didn't care. Something immediately caught my attention. A phrase repeated constantly in the messages. "Wants to observe." I wrote that down too. I put my notebook away just as a patrol car pulled up beside us. A couple of agents from the state investigative police got out. I had never seen them before, not unusual. Different agencies working in the same city. Too many agents to know them all. I thought more patrol cars would start arriving: federal, state, municipal, National Guard. The area would be secured, but that didn't happen. They were the only ones who showed up. "You can leave now," they told us. It sounded more like an order than a suggestion. "We'll take it from here." I hesitated until my partner patted me on the shoulder. I looked at him. "Let's go," he said. I could see the urgency on his face to get out of there. I had no choice. I got back into the patrol car. Andre started the engine and we drove away. It was silent. I couldn't get what I had just seen out of my head. "That thing," Andres broke the silence. "Throw it away." I didn't need him to explain what he meant. I knew perfectly, the notes I had taken from the man's phone. "Where are you going?" I interrupted when he made a U-turn. "Aren't we going to look for that guy?" "No, we're going back to the station, and I'm going to give you some advice. Don't say or ask anything about what we just saw. And I'll repeat it, whatever you wrote down. Throw it away, burn it, and forget about it." My blood was boiling, but it was the most sensible thing. Like I said, we're not trained in combat or tracking. We just know how to check for badly parked cars and leave tickets on windshields. But what bothered me the most was his refusal to dig deeper into the case. I spent that whole afternoon thinking about what I had seen. I don't have access to files or investigations, but I had something, some phone numbers, and a lot of curiosity. I finished my shift and left the station without saying goodbye to anyone. I checked Facebook pages from my city amateur journalists who rushed to scenes to live stream. Nothing. As if nothing had happened. I stopped at a convenience store, bought a SIM card and a cheap phone, and went home. I added the number I had written in my notebook. I thought about what I should say. I remembered the image of those small points in the dark, those eyes staring at me in terror, and what I had seen in the messages. "Wants to observe." I also want to observe. Send. I sat there for a few minutes holding the newly bought phone, sweating, breathing heavily, my heart pounding loudly. My mind drifted, almost shutting down, until a sound and vibration snapped me back to reality with a terrible jolt. The lock screen showed an SMS notification. My heart was racing. An image. It was very dark, but I could see a person. I couldn't see his face. It was hidden in shadow, positioned so the light wouldn't reach it, but I could see a necklace around his neck. It looked like a rosary, but the mysteries were too large. It was framed so that it stood out in the foreground. He wanted me to notice it. That's when I did. My stomach twisted. They were eyes. The man had a necklace made of eyes, eyeballs hanging by the optic nerve, tied together with what looked like a thin cord. I focused so much on that I didn't notice what was behind him. Two faint glowing points. I turned my screen brightness all the way up and barely made out a chair, and on it, a small child tied up. I could see those terrified eyes, identical to the ones I had seen earlier while on patrol. Another message. A string of numbers and digits that made no sense, until I saw how it started. BC1Q. Bitcoin. Could it be that those stories I saw in creepypasta videos online weren't just real, but happening in my city, right under my nose? I remembered Andre's warning. It was clear he knew more. And the way those state agents kicked us out of the scene, and the silence in the news. On top of that, the person was sending me an SMS that could easily be traced by telecom operators, but he didn't care. It made no sense to ask for money in Bitcoin while sending the address via SMS. Or maybe it's simply complicity from the authorities. I sat there like an idiot, staring into nothing, with no intention of sleeping. I knew I wouldn't be able to. Then another message came, giving me the same shock as before. A video. My fingers trembled as I brought it closer to my phone. The lights in my room began to flicker slightly. I felt a horrible cold air and a bad feeling invading my space. I gathered my courage. I pressed play. The man was in frame again. I could see his chest, that disturbing necklace. He moved his hand toward the first eye. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. First mystery. The image turns blurry. It's censored. And thank God it is, because what I hear is a horrible scream from a small person. I'm gripping the phone tightly. Even though I can't see anything, I can imagine what's happening. I don't know how long it lasted, but the screams made me sick. I dropped the phone, stood up, tried to reach the bathroom but couldn't. I vomited. My half-digested dinner spilled into the hallway. I heard the phone again. This time the sound was different. It was ringing. I could feel it vibrating too. I picked it up, almost as if something forced me. I pressed the answer button. You still want to observe?